to another episode of Yarns for the Soul. As always, I am Nicole. Welcome. Thank you for joining me and coming back. Bringing another mini yarn to you all today, and had some awesome responses from the last mini yarn that I did about being an introvert, and it's lovely to get feedback from you all and hearing from people that it resonated with. That's really kind of the motivation behind the podcast, is sharing parts of my story and having guests be willing to share parts of their stories as well, and hope that it resonates with other people and we can learn from each other along the way. We're jumping in with some more vulnerability on my part, sharing some more of my story. And this time I will be talking about the weight of stress. Normally that would be probably figurative, but in this situation I will actually be talking about physical, literal weight, which is quite a personal topic, and it's not something that I've really shared widely with too many people, but excited to talk about it today. And when this is released, it's actually going to be over a year since I left my last job as a lawyer, which is kind of insane. I don't know where that time has gone, and I knew when I stepped away from the law that I wanted a break. I didn't really know what that would look like or how long it would be for. I thought I was probably close to a point of burnout and just needed to stop and take a rest, but I didn't actually anticipate when I did stop that it would be for so long. And it was kind of like my body just took over and said, we're done, we're actually having a proper rest now, not just a month or two. And kind of felt like I had to go right back to square one and build from there. I guess a key part of my story over the past year has involved me working with a naturopath. I remember seeing GPs in different cities as I moved around the country, often checking in and saying, hey, I'm struggling with low energy. I don't know what the answer is, but just looking for some help. There'd often be kind of the discussion about like my lifestyle and exercise and diet and all that jazz. And then most of the time just be sent off for a blood test. I think majority of the time the results came back as like, quote, within range, whatever that actually means. I think once or twice I was given a prescription for like iron supplements, but either way I was kind of then just sent on my way and didn't actually notice any particular improvements, and it was actually my sister who pointed me in the direction of a naturopath, and didn't really have any idea what to expect, but was sort of willing to go in any direction because I was still struggling and nothing had actually helped. So before the first appointment I had to fill out this really extensive questionnaire, because it's such a sort of holistic approach. So it was everything from diet to exercise to your cycle to what does your poop look like, which, great way of getting to know someone. But during the first appointment, the way that she was sort of explaining things to me, it just clicked, and I'm like, no one's put these things into words before. And she was talking about stress and my lifestyle being like in a prolonged state of stress for kind of years, and how that affects the nervous system and the overall effects on your body and your health of being in like constant fight or flight mode. And it was something I was sort of aware of, but hadn't actually thought about how it would impact my health. You sort of just think, oh, I'm a bit stressed, but I'll carry on. You don't actually think that it's having a long-term effect on your physical health. But when you're in fight or flight mode, you're not actually functioning at an optimum level because your body is doing everything to try and protect you. And the way the naturopath explained it to me is that I ended up being in a state of what she calls adrenal fatigue. So that's where your adrenal glands aren't actually functioning properly. So I did some Googling into this, and there's different opinions out there. Some people don't believe that adrenal fatigue is even a thing, that it's not actually a real diagnosis. I guess some people think the same symptoms could be put into another umbrella, possibly chronic fatigue. But the way that the naturopath explained everything to me makes sense to me, and so that's kind of what I'm rolling with for the time being. And she sort of said, I'm not in a place where it's chronic fatigue, because if I need to do something, if I need to get up early, set my alarm, even though I might not be happy about it, I can still get up and do it. I can force myself to do it. So it's not impossible, but it's just like consistently low energy. So at the end of last year, I invested in some hormone testing to see what was kind of going on, so that we could get a clearer picture for her to help me moving forward. And the testing basically confirmed that my cortisol levels were really low across the board. So I am not a medical professional or a doctor. This is my understanding. But basically stress is like the wake up and go hormone, which is meant to kind of peak in the morning to get you up and moving. And it's also the stress hormone. So the way that she explained it to me was like, because I'd been in a heightened state of stress for so long, my body was in fight or flight mode. It was producing cortisol constantly on overdrive, keeping me alert, which the body thinks it's doing the right thing, because it's, it's identifying all these threats and trying to keep me alert to it. But then it finally reached a point where it was done and decided it was no longer producing any more cortisol, or certainly not to the right levels that you need to have all the energy that you need to function throughout the day. I remember at the end of the very first appointment with the naturopath, we'd gone over everything, and I'd brought up my weight, and I knew I wanted to sort of focus on my overall health. I didn't want to get too tied down on the idea of losing weight, but it was an important factor to me. The idea of being able to lose weight had just been automatically put in the too hard basket for me mentally for quite some time. And I think particularly the last couple of years while I was lawyering, I was barely functioning. I would get myself to work most days, not every day, and then come home and just crash. So often I didn't have the energy or mental capacity to cook. Thinking about that was just too hard. So usually just led to copious amounts of Uber Eats, which kind of gets you into this spiral. When you're not exercising, when you're not eating well, then you're obviously going to have low energy as a result. And I couldn't comprehend a way out of that, so I kind of just ignored it. And I was telling myself that because I was still holding down a full-time job, that I was doing okay, despite the fact that everything else had kind of fallen down around me. And because it was sort of in this mental too hard basket, I didn't talk to anyone else about my weight. I was kind of embarrassed. I didn't know how to fix it. So we just ignored it, like you do with all your problems. And the way the naturopath explained things to me was like, when your body's in fight or flight mode, because it's not operating at the top sort of optimum level, it's actually trying to protect you and store fat. So she said when you're in that state, it's actually really hard to lose weight, even if you're eating healthy and exercising appropriately. The first step is actually de-stressing the nervous system, bringing it back into equilibrium, which made complete sense to me when she explained it. So when I mentioned to her that I wanted to lose weight, she said she thought it would probably naturally happen, at least to some extent, as a result of the general treatment plan that she had in mind. And I didn't know whether to believe her or not. I sort of had to hope for the best, because I didn't know what else to do, and I certainly didn't feel like I had the energy to get out there and start exercising constantly or join a gym or something. So for me, the main thing that changed over the past year has been my lifestyle. I removed nearly all of the stress triggers from my life, everything that had existed, and focused on rest, which was sort of intentional, but it was sort of self-imposed by my body just deciding that it needed a lot of rest, and sort of slowly but surely brought in movement. And that's not exercise, that's just movement. That's walking, every couple of days, and then working on increasing the length of my walks. Looking after other people's dogs was really helpful because it was forced dog walking. And so my first session with the naturopath was sort of end of May last year, and then a couple of days into taking the supplements that she'd sent through, I got COVID. So that really knocked me back a bit, and probably because my whole system was still trying to heal and rest, I was knocked quite hard by COVID. So after that, it was sort of a really slow and steady process, and I tried not to focus too much on how long it was going to take to get back to 100%, because the thought was kind of scary and overwhelming, and not knowing what that looks like, how long it's going to take, really leaning in and trusting the process. But I guess along the way, I kind of learnt to listen to my body and listen to what it needs and actually start paying attention, because I had certainly been ignoring all of it for quite some time. And it was in the second half of last year that I started getting comments from people around me that I was looking really good, that I was back to being myself again, that I looked brighter. And brighter was a word that a few people used, and it kind of struck me. And I think initially I didn't let myself believe what they were saying. I didn't let myself believe that I was actually getting better, that I was getting healthier, because it had been just this thing that was in the too hard basket for so long. And I guess the flip side of it is also a bit depressing. Realizing that I hadn't been myself for quite some time, that I was a bit distant in my relationships, and I think that was really tough, struggling to process that I hadn't really been myself for a while. So it was because of these comments that I took the brave step of weighing myself, which is not something I would normally choose to do, and don't actually have scales at home, so it was while I was house sitting and dog sitting for friends. And generally I know weight is just a number, and it is more important to focus on how you're feeling, and that's generally how I am approaching things moving forward too. But I guess I was just curious because I'd had quite a few of these comments, and unfortunately the reason why I knew the weight that I had started at is from doctor's appointments. They go in and you do your checkup and they take your blood pressure and whatever, and then they make you step on the scales, with no real option, it seems, to opt out, because often you're in a doctor's office and you're potentially not in a great headspace, and there doesn't seem to be that awareness about what stepping on the scales could do to your mental health in that moment. But that's kind of a whole nother story, isn't it? So there's a very clear moment to me. I went to see a friend, I think late September last year, greeted all the doggos, and then she took this moment where she sort of stepped back and looked at me, and I was like, what's happening? And she said, you're looking really good. And I burst into tears. There's such this visceral reaction, and it was such a strange combination of emotions, because there was clearly something needing to be released there. It was sort of this combination of like joy and happiness, and then relief and kind of proud of myself that I was starting to feel more like a human again. And yeah, it's been an interesting journey over the last year. I'm still not at 100%, but yeah, despite being being a work in progress, I realised that actually sadly, in a way, the one way of quantifying the amount of healing that I have done is actually the weight change. That's the one thing that I can put a number on. And while I don't want to promote that and I don't want to focus on weight moving forward, I think it's kind of an interesting part of my story to share, and realizing that I can actually put a number on the stress and the lifestyle for me, and I can say how much stress weighed, which when I kind of realized that was pretty crazy. So for me, and obviously it's going to be different for everyone, but for me that magic number is 14. And while there are lots of other factors obviously going on around that, in essence you could say that my stress, my lifestyle, living in constant fight or flight mode, that stress weighed 14 kgs. And that is insane. And I find it kind of insane that all I did was actually rest, basically. I removed most of the stressful triggers from my life and changed my lifestyle. I slowly brought in more movement. Hadn't really changed my diet either. I mean, I still cooked similar things for myself. I always overate pasta. That still hasn't changed. And I mean, they definitely ate slightly better because there's no Uber Eats here. So I had to cook more things at home, but still haven't joined a gym to this day. So it was only the past sort of couple months since sort of late November that I've been building on fitness levels and bringing in exercise with some awesome training assistance from my sister. So that's also been slow and steady too. It's been more about building habits and consistency, and also I have realized a lot of it is about retraining my brain and my belief system about myself. So proving to myself that I can do stuff, where the previous version of me was someone who thought that it was too hard, that I didn't think I could do it. So yeah, people often ask what I've been up to over the past year since I left my last job as a lawyer. And really the honest response is a lot of rest and not much else some days. And I think I was worried for a start about what other people would think when I chose to take time out, and when that turned into a prolonged version of time out. But now I realise, the improvements in my health that I can see, that I can feel, that other people have commented on, have been 100% worth it. And now I am just a huge advocate on taking a full holistic view on health and healing, rather than trying to put a band-aid on particular problems and carry on and pretend like that's actually going to fix it. So it has been a huge undertaking, and there's been times where it's been really hard, feeling like I've had to go back to square one completely and then rebuild. And trusting is a lot of trust and a lot of slow kind of gains and improvements. But it has been 100% worth it. And now I have a much deeper understanding about the effects of stress on the body. And, this is something that I will probably continue to talk more about in the future as well. And, I think I'm still a little bit in shock myself about the fact that just changing my lifestyle and not changing much else, and realizing that, for me, the effects of stress had basically weighed 14 kgs, and not sure how long that had been around for, but it was definitely sort of a constant build up. So here's to feeling more like myself, feeling more energetic, and making sort of small, consistent improvements in my life. And there's other stuff that's been kind of happening in the background as well, and more parts of my story that I have to share. So definitely got another mini yarn in the pipeline that will kind of be a good complement, I think, to share another part of my story over the past year in particular. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope that, by sharing this and telling parts of my story, that it makes it easier for other people to share theirs. So thank you again for listening, and I can't wait to yarn with you again soon.